We've all seen the horrible portrayals of heroin overdose on the news lately. You know, the two middle-aged adults who are unconscious in the front of the recently immobilized SUV while a 4-year-old grandchild just waits in the back. Or the images of the young mother who is totally unresponsive on the floor of the grocery store while her baby desperately tries to wake her. Another problem that we are facing in this nation is the overcrowding of our prison system due to the mass incarceration of nonviolent drug offenders. There are so many nonviolent offenders in prison that there's not room for the violent criminals, and the taxpayer ultimately has to foot the bill for what is not covered by the federal budget. The United States should legalize medicinal marijuana and decriminalize the use of marijuana in an effort to alleviate our current opioid addiction crisis and lessen the overcrowding of our prison systems. Addiction, abuse, and overdose of opioid-based drugs is at an all-time high. Most overdoses are from opiate-based painkillers. Alice Park wrote in 2016 in Time magazine that more people died of drug overdose in 2014 than any other year. 60% of those overdoses were at the hands of painkillers. Prescription opioid drug addiction has been associated with heroin use. Doctors Deborah Danowitz and Joseph wrote an article titled Heroin Use in 2016, in which they reported that individuals addicted to prescription opioid drugs are 40 times more likely to be addicted to heroin. Their 2016 article titled Heroin Use, published in the Journal of Psychosocial Nursing and Mental Health Services, also stated that heroin users have cited reasons for switching from prescription opioid drugs, which include availability and cost. So you go to the doctor, you broke your ankle, they give you OxyContin or some other opiate-based drug, the prescription runs out, you're addicted, and now you have no other alternative than to turn to the streets and find an illegal street drug, such as heroin, which will give you the same level of pain relief. Highly addictive pain pills are overprescribed. The 2016 article titled Heroin Use by Deborah Danowitz and Joseph reads that over the past 2 decades, prescription opioid drug availability and use has increased in the United States. Americans consume 86% of the world's opioids. That's way too much. There's got to be an alternative painkiller. Another issue that we're facing in this country is that the federal prison system is overcrowded due to the overprosecution of nonviolent drug offenders. The war on drugs is responsible for the overcrowding of our prisons. Nick Pinto wrote an article titled Why Can't We End Mass Incarceration in 2015, in which he reported that Congress created the mandatory minimum penalties in order to standardize punishment, and the prison population swelled from 24,000 prisoners in 1980 to over 219,000 prisoners in 2013. Pinto also wrote in his 2016 article published in the Rolling Stone that nearly half of federal inmates are serving time for drug offenses. 60% of those inmates were subject to the mandatory minimums at the time of their sentencing. The lack of rehab from overcrowding and lengthy sentences results in recidivism and revocation of parole. Recidivism is a repeat offense. So these prisoners are getting out on parole. They've had no treatment and no rehab, and they are committing either the same crime or a new crime. They're losing their parole and being sent back to prison, which in turn contributes to the overcrowding. Dr. Rudemans, Wilson, and Reed wrote a 2015 article titled Does Prison Crowding Predict Higher Rates of Substance Use?, in which they report that crowding overextends prison resources financially and personnel-wise, which are needed to provide drug rehabilitation services. The lack of access to treatment is a known risk factor for drug or substance use disorders. Dr. Ruderman, Wilson, and Reed also, in their 2015 article published in the Public Library of Science, report that longer sentences lead to less successful reintegration into society. So these prisoners are incarcerated For long periods of time. There is no treatment, no rehab to help them be better people. They are cut loose back into society. They're still addicted to drugs, and they don't know how to seek treatment. They become institutionalized because the overcrowding in the prison system causes, there's still violence going on, there's still drug use going on. They need help to be better people and to function in society. In conclusion, there are many problems going on in this country, but there are two that I think are of a higher priority. The first is that the overprescription of highly addictive painkillers causes high rates of abuse and overdose. And the other is that the high rates of prosecution and the lack of rehabilitation for drug offenders causes overcrowding in our prison system. That is why I'm proposing that the United States should legalize medicinal marijuana and decriminalize the use of marijuana in an effort to alleviate the country's current opioid addiction crisis and lessen the overcrowding of our prison systems. There has got to be an alternative for pain, and we have got to keep these people out of prison.